Hello and welcome to this special program. I am Tarnia Green, a special program brought to you by Digicel Play TV. Today I have joining me social worker and former head of the Child Fund Caribbean, Mr. Francis Joseph. And today we'll be talking about the burning issue relating to child abuse in Dominica. In recent times we've been hearing a lot in the public, much discussion, much concern about the situation involving young children in Dominica and abuse. And to talk to me, to bring some greater insight and perspective on this very important matter is Mr. Joseph. Mr. Joseph, thank you for joining me on this important discussion.
Thank you very much.
It's great to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. And thank you very much for having me here.
You're welcome, you're welcome. Now, you've been involved in social work for quite a number of years, having headed the Child Fund Caribbean a few years ago.
Right.
And you've had the opportunity to interact with a number of young people across Dominica on many social issues. But today we're taking a pause to look at the abuse of children in Dominica. Talk to me. How serious is that a situation?
It's a very serious matter, and in the news we have a lot of other organizations, NGOs themselves, promoting the cause of stamping out abuse on young children. The reports coming out from the Welfare Division is also indicating that child abuse is on the rise. Child abuse, we have, or in particular myself, have made reference to that it has graduated away from the family home setting, the home, to other institutions in Dominica now. We probably will look at the reasons why that's happening and what's triggering that off, and it has to do with poverty. But it is more prominent now, and a lot of reports indicating it's coming from centers where youth gather, at the schools, at our educational institutions and other areas. Before, you will hear more of a stepfather or a father or a visiting uncle or a visiting member of the family in the home. Now you hear it's widespread. So that is a concern. And it is a serious concern because it affects the child emotionally, physically, psychologically. It affects the family, and it affects the child's learning abilities and to focus on her own personal development or his personal development.
Now, because of your concern for this issue, you undertook a survey recently, back in 2015, February, just recently, to get a better understanding of what the situation is on the ground. You had the opportunity to interact with young people aged 12 to 16, and those from the ages of 16 to 24, and they had the opportunity to share with you their own ideas, their own thinking about what child abuse is, how children are affected, what should the justice system do to address issues. Let's talk about some of their findings, some of the things that they've shared with you. In their mind, how do they define child abuse?
The first thing we did is we had a workshop, and one of it was done in partnership with Caraman, which is this male organization, where we look at building up the men, young men coming up, that they position themselves well in society. The workshop we did at that stage involved both young men and young women, promoting their individuality, their protection, and so on. And that theme was looking at child abuse and how it happens. So we had this documentary which we did some time ago called Voices of Abused Children. We showed it to them so that they can see the manifestation of child abuse, which was shot in Antigua, Dominica, and St. Vincent. After this, we had them in groups so that they can dialogue. We have been hearing about child abuse more or less from the professional and the adult point of view, where they are saying, this is what's happening, this is why it's happening, this is the cause, this is where we should be going, and so on. Because I've been involved in it and advocating that this abuse thing should be well addressed, we use the opportunity to hear from them what are the views of child abuse, how they think it manifests itself, and what are the reasons, who is involved, and what should be proposed, or what solutions are there to address it. In looking at it generally, we ask them to define sexual abuse. And some of the questions, we have a lot of answers there, but we'll just try to go through some of it. Sexual abuse is when a person meets a child going someplace in the night and he takes her a place and rapes her and tells her not to tell anyone, and that he will meet her and he will beat her. So that means if she talks, this is what would happen. So apart from the abuse, there's threats and there are warnings to that young child: do not go talking to anybody. Sexual abuse is someone who got abused with someone who is big or small. Sexual abuse is forcing yourself on someone who is abused without consent, focusing someone to have sex, or wrong or bad use of something to use someone badly. When a person rapes somebody, is to treat someone badly or wrongly, to treat someone cruelly, or to say unpleasant things about a person or thing. These young people have a perception now of what's happening. Either they've heard it on the radio, they have followed it on the news, or they know someone in the community, or they've heard about it in their home setting itself. Although they are silent onlookers, they are very much aware how to define abuse because of what they've seen or because of what they have experienced, and that is a problem.
Are they right on target?
They are right on target. I was amazed of the response. I was amazed of the extreme of the responses that they were giving, and I was amazed at how openly they were giving their responses, simply because it's happening. It says a number of things. They may not have a voice. They probably can talk to their parents about it. They probably can talk to the people about it, because usually the perpetrators are people who have access to the home. The perpetrators are people who are in education, in institutions or centers and so on. And they do not walk out openly to be abused. These are people, one way or the other, have access to them to a certain extent, maybe stalk them, or maybe look at how vulnerable they are, meaning that they may need money, they live in poverty, they live in a family which is dysfunctional, and all of those things. So there are a lot of things that are happening why they are able to come across and give those answers.
I'm hearing a very alarming, revelation coming from you. You're talking to me, you're letting me understand that some of these perpetrators are people in the education system?
There are people out there who are engaged in it that they have spoken of. There are people in the past who have resigned or have been dealt with as far as that is concerned. There are people out there for purposes of jobs. There are people out there who are extended family members who have access to the homes, and the Voices of Abused Children, the documentary, has highlighted what has happening in all of those 3 islands I made reference to. So now you are hearing the young people indicating what is happening. We have testimonial of a young woman who is being stalked by someone within one of our education institutions and so on. Most of them don't want to come forward because either the home or the family or the parents may not give them the approval to do it, so they are holding back. And that's one of the concerns that we have with young people. One of the issues of doing this again, we are beginning to hear stories in the States and in the UK and other metropolitan countries where after 30, 40 years, victims are coming out now identifying who is it doing them. In South Yorkshire in the UK, for example, where in Rotherham, the entire council cabinet had to resign because they did nothing about it. The police chief was forced to resign. The director of the social services resigned, and many other people resigned because these cases were kept secret. A number of prominent people now have been sent away to prisons, one of them in their 70s, in their 80s, and in their 60s, who have been involved in working with children, who have been involved in programs with children and used their authority to abuse them and did a number of things about it. So those things are happening, and that is why I've said now it has elevated or graduated from the home setting into other areas where perpetrators identify young people who are vulnerable, in need of help, or as a result of some level of poverty.
You are aware of this situation, this reality that has struck Dominica. You as a social worker, what is your intention? What is your plan? What is your recommendation? What are your suggestions going forward?
What I'm doing right now is sort of advocacy. That is the reason why almost 11 years ago we did that documentary, because it is worth having empirical evidence and data to indicate to people the trend of what's happening. We will not only look at the act of abuse, but we look at the the psychological impact it has on a child, where in Antigua, Dr. Herkinson, a psychiatrist, a clinical psychiatrist, made reference to a documentary when she says, a young child's mind and brain is not positioned for sexual activity. It is for learning. They are still growing up. A 15-year-old child, they cannot process the activity because of what it engages. They're in that transition growing up. And to do that is halting them and confusing them more. So this is one of the messages we want to take care of. These young people are vulnerable. They should not be interrupted in any way, shape, or form. They should not be coerced or forced into that kind of activity. So that is what we are looking for. Some of them are not necessarily coerced, but are forced or caused to have relationships with men who are older than them. And for obvious reasons, it may not be an abuse in the sense of a physical abuse, but it is mentally and psychologically and taking advantage of a young person. That's what we are doing. On the other part of what I'm doing is there are organizations now and NGOs like Child Fund currently, and there's what you call the NGO Coalition and Carryman. They themselves are advocating along those lines, and that is why their mission and their purpose in functioning is also targeted at that area of abuse going on, and in their own operations they are having programs and preventive programs to ensure that people are aware of what's happening.
Based on your understanding of things, why do people abuse children?
Well, why do abuse? If we take it from the voices or the responses of the young people, they say to have sex with someone to get them in a bad reputation. Why? People get abused because they think they are not special. These are the voices of these young people. It could be they're nervous to do something and they do it. They are nervous to do something and they do it. They abuse because they are broken heart. They do not think. They abuse so they can take advantage of this person. Sometimes they don't have sexual intercourse or they just do it for fun. When they don't get any woman and sex, they abuse the children and other people's children because they have nothing to do for fun, because people abuse some people for drugs and so on. So they are indicating in their own minds why they think adults abuse people, children. These are what the young people are actually saying. These are their responses as to what's happening. When they don't get any woman and sex, they abuse the children and other people's children.
When you talk to these young people, what sort of pain are they expressing to you?
It's
comes
frightening.
to them as a result of child sexual abuse?
In one of the 3 islands we were in, one of the things a young woman said to us was the family member was literally stuck in the home because they knew when the parents and everybody is gone out and she would be alone in the house. And he went into the house to abuse her and she was resisting. And because of his authority and his size and this teenager, he continued pursuing. Then what saved them or saved her was there were footsteps coming up the steps to the room where they were, and he ran through the window. It so happened what was coming up there was the family dog, not a person, so that's what saved her. Mm-hmm. It's like an intrusion. It depends on the person who is doing it, a family member, an uncle, a stepfather, or whatever. They are dismayed about it because you expect when an intruder comes to your home, it's a foreigner, it's someone who's not used to being in your home. You look in dismay, saying, what are you doing there, and so on. When this family person who is there with you every day, feeding you, and all of a sudden approaches you, they don't know what to say. They are shocked. They can't say a word because this thing is happening to them and they can't believe it's happening to them. Sometimes they don't have the words to express how they feel, but you could feel the pain and you could feel the shame and you could feel the dismay and you could feel that they feel in a funny way which sometimes they can't express, but their facial expression says it all, that they were shocked that it's happening, especially the person doing it to them.
The harsh realities of child abuse in Dominica. We're taking a close-up look at it from the children's voices themselves through a study, through a survey done by Francis Joseph. We take a break now. We'll be back in just a moment.
Accurate, dependable. We go where others have not gone before. We bring you in-depth reporting on the stories that matter. Tune in weeknights from 8:30 p.m. to 767 News, with repeats at 10:30 p.m. and 6 a.m. the following morning. 767 News, Dominica's #1 news source, only on Digital Play TV, Channel 3. Be part of the excitement. Tune in to the Tarnia Green Show every other Monday on Digital Play TV, Channel 3.
Welcome back, viewers. We're talking something very serious, the issue of child abuse, child sexual abuse in Dominica. Shedding some light on the situation is social worker Francis Joseph. Now, before the break, we talked to you about some of the effects, the pain voiced by the children about sexual abuse. Let's go back to that, Francis.
Some of the responses we got is very interesting. They feel hurt and have scars for the rest of their life. That means some of them in the group, new people or even those within the group sometimes, will not say that they have been victims, but they have the experience of what has happened. They feel shame, hate, anger, and they will cry. Some of them cry innocently, some of them cry quietly, some of them cry in their rooms and not in the open of other people. There is shame, there is discourage, hurt them when they think about it, when they see the children. The abused child feels shame, discouraged, and hurt by crying. Angry, they feel heartbroken. Some people get hurt by throwing themselves on the ground and cry. So there's a lot of pain going on in there and they internalize it. That pain is very strong in what they feel. You feel unhappy and you feel sad. The abused child will feel the pain by having sexual intercourse. Abuse is different. So all of those things is a concern for all of them in how they feel.
For the average citizen, for the average man, woman looking on, what are some of the telling signs to indicate that, this child is probably a victim of sexual abuse?
So that is one of the things that closely we will have to look at a little bit more, and it probably will come out in a one-to-one with them when you take some notes. Obviously, some of the family members will indicate. One of the things that we look out for is when it happens, are they able to relate to their parents about it? Because it is so close to the family. Will the parents believe them and say it's not true? This person cannot do it. Therefore, you have to trust the child and talk to the child. And if it matters, get some help from a social worker, the welfare division, to help you get that child to relate her experience. If that child doesn't address it, the pain stays, as is mentioned here, and usually there'll be a lot of crying. The child will feel the pain physically and emotionally. And even if you say no, what happens to you? Those we interviewed on the documentary Incognito, during the interview, some of them were crying and some of them were reliving the incidents. We did some of the interviews incognito, and not everyone knew that we were doing it to protect themselves. So basically, that's what happens. And the fear of relationships, the fear of having this person, the fear also of not having the opportunity to naturally go into a relationship and build up a relationship with a young man, and that someone have imposed themselves on you. It's the fear of doing that naturally now because of that intrusion in your life, psychologically and mentally. So that is one of the problems they have. They will need help, and they will need more so the help and the support and the confidence from their parents, and not to label them like you are the one who caused it. You dressed that way, you were out. That child has a right to be out. No one has a right to impose themselves on anybody as far as that is concerned, especially as a young child who's supposed to be at school, because you're affecting the child's psychological development, her learning development. You are focused on learning, and this person is introducing something to you which naturally you will engage in when you are more mature and you are prepared to do it. But to interrupt one's education and developmental process for your own sexual satisfaction is wrong. It is morally wrong. It is definitely not right.
Why are men abusing children?
Because they want money. They want to do certain things. They feel that they are young and they are innocent, and some of them indicate maybe that they are virgins. It's a matter of a power and authority and to force. They will meet a woman of their same age and their same peers, and then you will have to obviously get to know the person. We have women who are raped themselves, where people impose themselves on them, but the children are easy targets. Some of it is basically to get, is for the point of getting money. We have somewhere where they indicate, why do men abuse girls and boys? It says here they come from poor family, men have power, men have the money, it's a vulnerable family, the women want money, girls want money, they are single mothers, family do not have their own home and their own house, lack of love. And basically, for aspect was made here about wanting material things. So it's like a payment, an exchange of money and other stuff, which basically is the word that you mainly refer to as prostitution, because that is what it is, once you exchange that money. And you put that child in a condition to compromise herself because she's in need. So the men will obviously identify the homes and the families that are in need, that are in some level of poverty. They will target them and they'll target those children.
What sort of systems are in place to help the victims, cushion the pain, deal with the situation?
The best institution is the family home and the family setting. And because this is their comfort zone and where they live, you need to have the security and the bonding strengthened with their parents. Anyone who comes in is through an intervention process, like a social worker, a psychiatrist, or a counselor. They cannot work with that child on their own. They must have the family, because at the end of the day, this is where the child has to go back to, that family setting. Therefore, the family setting needs to be strong, it needs to be secured. The parents themselves, as far as supervision is concerned, how do you now monitor and manage your home setting? Who are your friends, who are your family members, and have some ground rules that when you are out or you're on your own, who should be coming into the home, and how far do they go, and how they should be entertained. Or you may have some serious ground rules, no one comes in until I get out. Then again, you don't want to imprison the mind and the body of a young child of 14, 15, 16. They have friends, they must go out. Having them locked in a house is not going to help. They have to try as much as possible to live a normal life where they can go about their business, socializing with their friends. That's what they're about. They are growing, they have to do it. But there are some systems that must be put in place. And with a counselor or a social worker, they can go through it with the parents, ask them how they manage their homes, who are their friends, who do you think is a risk, and to have a plan of calling a neighbor or letting the neighbor know what's happening so you can look out. It can be done on their own. And to put that responsibility on a child to be developing defense mechanisms of how you survive, it's unnatural, because children grow naturally. They're exuberant, they want to explore their environment, they want to do certain things. You restrict them now in an area, it's like a form of psychological imprisonment, which is not right for them. So whoever is working with that family will raise most of those things, try to find out the home and the community environment, what it is like, and then they'll plan and take it from there.
What some sort of advice would you have for parents to deal with their children on finding out that their kids have been abused?
You have to monitor your child when they come home, what time they come home. At the age of 15, 16, you need to know and have some discipline in your home where that child is supposed to be. You know the child is going somewhere, you need to know the child goes there. The children has friends, encourage them to have their friends, and encourage the friends to come home. The more the friends come home, the more you build that bond and trust within the family, and the parents know that when they go that they are safe. The friends come home, you socialize with the friends, you may have them to be part of the meal, the supper, the dinner, whatever. That bonds it. At the same time, you use the opportunity to ask questions. Get to know the parents of your friends, of your children's friends. Get to know them. Let them know indirectly that you are monitoring them and what are the problems out there that you have to be faced with. In dialoguing, parents need to be very strong in communicating and to be patient. And not to look out too much for this level of discipline, which is spanking or being robust or you are that authority. You don't have to demonstrate that you're the authority. The way you conduct yourself in the home, the child will pick up that you're the authority. You are that person they should feel secured with, confident with, and have no fear. So you do not have to go out lecturing them at that way. The way it is done is the way you conduct yourself in the home. You are the authority in the home, you go to bed, you ask them questions when they come from school or from college, and you engage them in the best way possible. Don't tell them they can't have friends. They may say, I have a little boyfriend, that's fine. Bring him home, let's talk. But you have to know the boundaries, you have to set the ground rules. And if you do that in the best way possible to a child, they will listen and they will bond with you. They will know that you love them and they will respect you. So part of it has to be for a lot of parenting. There are homes we know that the parents are not working, they live in some level of poverty, and that is an issue. Some of those homes are going through a lot of problems, insecurity. The parents themselves feel in a state of mind that they do not know what to do and they cannot provide for their families. That is a big problem in Dominica right now, where families are desperate for money, for food, and to have some semblance of decent living. That is a big problem now in Dominica, not only in the rural communities, but in the urban areas and the suburban areas of Roseau itself and within Roseau. Those things need to be addressed. So the more you elevate the living conditions of families and their dignity is raised to a point that they do not have to be begging for money or dependent on someone else for money or dependent on some person in authority for money, the more they're going to feel secured. The more they have to go down that route of vulnerability and be dependent on someone else is the more they become insecure and not know what to do and difficult for them to focus getting a job and stabilizing themselves in some income generating activity.
When we come back, we'll talk about the official legislation. We'll also talk about punishment, what we should do to address this situation. That's coming up on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
Have some fun, enjoy yourself. Yeah, man.
It's my time, it's your time, it's our time. Another exciting local show comes to your screen on Digicel Play TV Channel 3. When? Every Thursday from 9 p.m. Join host JL Joseph with stimulating chit-chat about what's up, what's on, music, entertainment, arts and craft, and much more. We'll talk business, leisure, holidays, and family, all to engage our viewers on various aspects of life. Join us for Our Time, where we talk about absolutely everything, right here on Digicel Play TV.
Accurate, dependable. We go where others have not gone before. We bring you in-depth reporting on the stories that matter. Tune in weeknights from 8:30 p.m. to 767 News, with repeats at 10:30 p.m. and 6 a.m. the following morning. 767 News, Dominica's #1 news source, only on Digicel Play TV Channel 3.
Thank you for staying with us. We're having a very important discussion talking about sexual abuse of children in Dominica. And I have with me social worker Francis Joseph, who is shedding some light on the important discussion here today. Let's talk about punishment. In the eyes of the children, how would they like to see abusers
very
treated?
interesting, and they were very vocal about it. And usually in giving the feedback from the various groups that they sat in, the articulation by using their hands and their passion and taking a deep breath and saying what needs to be tells you the pain that they feel and what should be done. Some indicate the abuser should get 3 to 4 years jail. One says the abuser get to die and suffer in prison, a long prison sentence. They will have to go to jail for a long time and they should be tortured and put to death. The punishment for those who abuse children is sent to jail, death, torture again. They get tortured. They should be hanged, tortured, and put away for life. Hang them. Death for those who sexually abuse children, and they should perish. Those are some of the things that they indicated what should happen. They possibly see this thing as punishment, not necessarily deterrent, but in their own child mind and youthful mind, they're expressing what they see because something has been done. And they have that right to express it because knowing what some of them there may have known one or two who themselves have been abused, going through the documentary and having discussions among their peers, it came close to home to them if it would happen to me, even if it's a young boy or a young girl. That's how they feel.
Now, Dominica is governed, by UNICEF and the Convention on the Rights of the Child. As it relates to child sexual abuse, what are the laws as it relates?
Well, in Dominica, there will always be the Children's Act, which means that it's a protection act. That at that age of a child, where a child can give consent, is up to 16. So the state basically is what you refer to in the jargon as the state is the big daddy. They can intervene in the life of a child under 16 if there seems to be that there is poor parenting, there are no parents about, the child is being abused, the child doesn't have a voice of their own per se, so the state comes in through its relevant ministries, the Welfare Division, Ministry of Education, the Justice Ministry, will come in and do what they can as far as that is concerned. UNICEF is the one who guides around the world, is part of the United Nations Children's Fund, and the office, the regional office for the Caribbean is in Barbados. They are the ones who work closely with the governments around the Caribbean and in the world in ensuring that the laws are in place for their safe home, their protection, their education, their well-being, their leisure, their pleasure. Those things are there, and you have the 54 articles of what is referred to as the Convention on the Rights of the Child. A lot of people misinterpret that indicating children have rights. It's not that children have rights. These are the rights that we should follow as parents and as a state and family to ensure that the children go through that safe passage up until independence. In other words, it doesn't say anywhere that they have a right to $20 or $10. It doesn't say they have a right to a BlackBerry. It says they have a right to education, they have a right to a home, they have a right to family, they have a right to go to school, they have a right to be protected. This basically is what it is. What is missing, I would think, globally is there should be, as you have a convention on the rights of the child, there should be a right of obligations of parents by law.
Yes.
That you do not abandon, neglect your children. I think that is important.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily say that you have a right to be abusing your child in the form of serious corporal punishment. But I rather use the word discipline as against punishment and spanking and so on. It's on our laws. The United Nations and UNICEF are not happy that it's on our laws. I did a presentation at the United Nations in Geneva looking on the status of children in Dominica then when I was with the organization. And this is what came up. And I went back up with the government team where they did their rebuttal to indicate what's happening. But there's a campaign now for most countries around the world where that law is in their books to come off. I don't think Dominica is abusing in the sense of a state recognizing corporal punishment. In the schools, the law has changed in a way how that can be done, how punishment, physical punishment should be administered. And some people are still against it, and I think it's something that we have to continue to look at. I believe in promoting a lot of communication, a lot of talking to the child, a lot of embracing, to ensure that you don't have to go down that route about corporal punishment, because I don't think it necessarily works. A little touch on your shoulder to say behave yourself is not necessarily corporal punishment, but it's more or less getting the child's attention and showing the authority. What follows after that is how that teacher or that authority relates to the child. That is what is important. When you go dehumanizing the child and calling the child name, that itself doesn't help. So that's one of the problems that we have with the corporal punishment stuff.
As a state, as a country, are we too lenient on the perpetrators of sexual abuse in Dominica?
Interestingly, I was watching a documentary and they were comparing countries who sentence their nationals and the effect it has. The state was compared with Denmark and Copenhagen and Brussels, where the approach to punishment and rehabilitation, the focus is completely different. And it's a very interesting concept, which is now coming up, and I'll read more about it. The environment they are indicating to a certain extent is more accommodating the approach that they are taking, because you're preparing the perpetrator. At some point, they have to get back into the community. So the environment in the correctional institutions is completely different. You have people in the States who are on isolation, who are by themselves. That psychologically may not be helping that person. The question is, how long do you punish for? How long do you sentence someone for that they have learned the lesson and the society itself has learned it? Some people will say, throw away the key. What does that mean? So it's something that we have to look at. Basically, that how long do you want someone incarcerated? No matter how long you put the person for, 5 months, 5 years, 50 years, the state has to pay for it. You and I, our tax money, have to pay for it. Some say they're enjoying themselves, they have television. You don't want to see the cells in Denmark that we looked at. It's better than some of the hotels that I have seen around the world. So we have to be careful what we want for society. As far as apprehending, the police have done their best, the social services have done their best, albeit both are still limited in what they need to ensure that this thing is pursued. We as professionals, we want to go for early intervention and early detection. That is where we are extremely weak in Dominica, because our services do not really go outside of the city to ensure we can detect. And it calls for a multidisciplinary approach where the school is involved in identifying if a child walks in what is happening. That's why I believe teachers now need to be trained. Some part of the training should take in some social work concepts and interventions. Mm-hmm. You're not just teaching, but you're dealing with that human being. So if a child is not following in the classroom or not paying attention in the classroom, or the child falls asleep, you cannot discipline that child by giving him a demerit or sending him outside. You have to find out why is the child sleeping. If a child is sleeping in a classroom at 10 o'clock in the morning, you see that the child is hungry, the child hasn't had breakfast, or something is going on in the home. Mm-hmm. And if your brain is not nourished, it's going to get tired. Mm-hmm. So those are the things I believe we have to address as quickly as possible if we need to have our young people secured as far as abuse is concerned. So abuse is not only those perpetrators who go out and sexually abuse those young people. We have to look at abuse in its entirety in other areas, the silent abuse that goes on that we don't see, but children are being affected. And later in their years, we're asking for social workers to intervene to address the psychological impact that it has. Part of it has to do with poor parenting, dysfunctional homes, the serious poverty that goes on, and people are desperate for money and so on.
We will all appreciate that this is a work in progress.
Yes.
We've done studies, we've done research, we look at the statistics, we listen to the educators, we listen to the social workers, we listen to the policy makers. But the underlying question is, what can we do to ensure that we assist, help abused children?
How do we stop abuse from the children's point of view? We need to listen more to our young children. This is what they are saying. Listen to us. Show children more love, give them protection, give them courage to speak out. Some people like to tell their children to shut up. So at home we say shut up. In school the teacher said to speak up. You are confusing the child. It's like you can be seen but not heard. So that is a confusion by itself if we adults with children. Making movies or documentaries to inform children about it, by having a sexual abuse day, through educating parents how to talk and sensitize their child about abuse and what it is. This is what they are saying. Now, the cases we are seeing now that are documented in 2001 was 155 cases in Dominica. 96 were sexual abuse, 16 rape, 22 incest. That's way back in 2001. We have recent cases which shows that that thing is rising. So if we go back then, it is rising. That number, what's happening now, is alarming and shouldn't be happening. So we have a lot of work to do. Some ask for campaigns, women workshops, educating citizens through rallies, ensuring that the parent have work to provide for her children, which won't be platform for them to stay at home. More law enforcement, more open and understanding with their children. We should share more community love and respect. Don't be too protective on your child. environment have to be strict. So that's one of some of the feedbacks from the young people themselves in saying what should be done to address it. They need to be part of it. We need to partner with them to address it. And I think in the schools it's where we can have some of the early signs that something is happening. But the parents, the teachers, and the school need to have their eyes and ears open to detect any sort of behavioral patterns that are not common with them being at school, so that we can address and have that level of intervention.
Through this survey, obviously you've done a tremendous job. You know, you've assisted, you know, our society in getting a better perspective on the abuse, the sexual abuse more specifically taking place in Dominica. You are the country coordinator of the Partners of the Americas working with young people in Dominica.
It's the Partners is the organization. The program is called the Agana program.
The Agana program, right? Yes. And you're coordinating that program. You continue to work with young people in Dominica. You have this data, empirical data right here. What is your plan? Are you going to be submitting this report to the Welfare Division, the government of Dominica?
It will be done. It has already been shared with the media. It has already been shared with some of the NGOs, and a copy will be sent to them. I think I shared it with one worker already, but yes, it will be submitted to them that they can look at it and it can help and guide them in their meetings, in their workshops, and to be aware basically what's happening. All of this data from different sources needs to be looked at, and workshops need to be called, which will help us address it and to eliminate, if possible, as much as possible, the abuse that goes on for our children in Dominica.
The work continues. We want to thank you very much, Francis Joseph, for joining me on this special program on Digital Play TV Channel 3, talking about the harsh realities of child sexual abuse in Dominica. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Pleasure.